Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Ready for another deep dive into the world of cutting-edge science? Today, we're taking a look at a pre-publication research paper. And, well, it's really got me thinking about the future of medicine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it has, and I think it will you too, especially if you're interested in how AI and medicine are, starting to really intersect.
It's definitely a hot topic, and this research is a perfect example of that. There's a lot of
It really is.
really fascinating stuff happening right now.
Okay, so this paper basically introduces us to this thing called Phenformer. It's a new deep learning model that analyzes your genome sequence
Okay.
and tries to predict your risk of developing certain diseases.
Yeah, and what's really amazing is how much of your genome it can actually analyze. We're talking almost 3% of your entire genetic code,
Wow.
which is a huge jump from what we've been able to do before.
So it's like way more than just looking at a few genes here and there, right?
Exactly. It's about getting a much broader, more comprehensive view of your genetic makeup.
So it's not just about identifying those individual genes that might be linked to a disease. It's about understanding how all those genes interact with each other, right?
Absolutely. And how they're influenced by the environment and ultimately how they all work together to kind of shape your overall health.
So it's like we're trying to piece together this giant puzzle, and Phenformer is giving us way more pieces to work with.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And the more pieces we have, the clearer the picture becomes.
Now I know what you might be thinking.
What's that?
You might be thinking, wait, 3% still seems kind of small when we're talking about the entire human genome. And you'd be right. But remember, this is still a massive amount of data we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not just about the number, though. It's more about the level of detail we can see now. It's like having a high-resolution image instead of a blurry one, you know?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So how does this thing actually work? The researchers are calling it a multi-scale genetic language model, which sounds kind of intimidating, to be honest.
It does sound pretty complex, but the idea is actually pretty elegant. Think of your DNA as a language. This model can read that language on different levels, from individual letters to whole sentences, and then it basically translates all that information into your risk for certain diseases.
So it's not just looking at isolated snippets of DNA, it's looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's understanding the whole symphony of genetic information rather than just focusing on a single note.
I like that analogy. Okay,
Yeah.
So they put this Phenformer to the test, right? What did they actually find?
Well, they tested it on 6 major diseases: psoriasis, type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, diabetic retinopathy, hypothyroidism, and COPD. And the results were really impressive. It was able to accurately predict an individual's risk of developing these diseases.
Okay.
And it also gave us some pretty fascinating insights into the mechanisms driving those diseases.
So it's not just predicting risk, it's also helping us understand why that risk exists in the first place.
Exactly, and that's what makes this so exciting. If we can understand the why behind a disease, we can potentially develop earlier interventions, preventative measures, maybe even personalized treatments.
So how does this compare to the tools we already have for predicting risk?
So right now, we use what are called polygenic risk scores, or PRS, to predict an individual's likelihood of developing certain diseases.
Okay, so is that kind of like a credit score, but for your health?
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
Your PRS gives you a number based on your genes that indicates your overall risk for certain conditions.
Okay, so how does Phenformer fit into all of this? Does it replace PRS or does it work alongside it?
Well, what's exciting is that when researchers combined Phenformer with those traditional PRS methods, they actually saw a significant improvement in risk prediction accuracy across all 6 of those diseases.
Oh, wow. So it's like taking the old tools and making them way better, kind of like giving them a software upgrade or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's taking what we already know and making it much more powerful and accurate.
So is there anything else that makes this new model stand out?
There's another really important aspect to this, and that is the improvement was particularly noticeable in populations of non-European ancestry.
Oh, wow. Why is that significant?
Well, traditional PRS methods often don't perform as well in diverse populations, which can lead to, unequal access to healthcare and preventative measures.
So this could really help to address those disparities and make risk prediction more accurate for everyone.
Exactly. And that's a huge step forward in making sure personalized medicine is truly equitable.
This is also fascinating. It's like we're seeing science fiction become reality right before our eyes.
It really is.
But before we get too carried away, we should probably talk about the limitations as well. We mentioned that Phenformer analyzes about 3% of the genome, which is a lot, but it's still just a fraction of the whole picture.
That's true. But as technology gets better and as we gather more data, the potential for this model will only increase.
So even with its current limitations, this technology is already showing some pretty remarkable results.
Oh, for sure.
I'm excited to dive into some of those specific findings in the next part of our deep dive.
It's really remarkable what we're starting to see with this technology. Like, remember how we talked about Phenformer being like a detective uncovering those hidden clues in our DNA?
Yeah.
Well, let's look at a few specific examples that kind of bring that idea to life.
Okay, hit me with it.
All right. One of the most fascinating findings was the link that Phenformer revealed between psoriasis and the liver.
Now, I know psoriasis is a skin condition, so what does the liver have to do with it? That seems kind of random.
It does, right? That's what makes this finding so interesting. Doctors have actually observed this connection between psoriasis and fatty liver disease for a while, but they've never really understood why. It's like Phenformer might have given us a piece of that puzzle.
Okay.
It highlighted this specific gene called selenow that seems to be involved in both conditions.
So it's like this one gene is doing double duty, influencing both skin inflammation and liver function.
Yeah, that's the idea. It just goes to show how interconnected our bodies really are. Something happening in one organ can have these ripple effects in a completely different part of the body.
Wow.
And Phenformer is helping us understand those connections in ways we never could before.
It's like we're getting a whole new level of understanding of human biology. Okay, so psoriasis in the liver, that's one for the books. What other surprising connections did Phenformer find?
Another one that really stood out was the involvement of the small intestine in type 1 diabetes.
Interesting.
Specifically, Phenformer pointed to this gene called CYP7A1, which is involved in cholesterol metabolism.
Now remind me, what's the connection between cholesterol and diabetes? I thought that was more of a heart health thing.
Yeah, you're right. We usually associate cholesterol with heart health, but it turns out this particular gene, CYP7A1, is actually really active in the small intestine,
Oh, yeah.
and it plays a role in how we digest and absorb fats, including cholesterol. And Phenformer found that variations in this gene might actually be linked to an increased risk of type 1 diabetes.
So is it like Phenformer saying, hey, pay attention to what's going on in the small intestine. It might be more important for diabetes than we thought.
Exactly. And this finding is actually supported by some earlier research that showed changes in cholesterol markers in people with type 1 diabetes. But Phenformer is taking that knowledge a step further by actually pinpointing specific genes and cell types that could be involved.
It's like it's giving us a high-resolution map of the disease, showing us where to zoom in for further investigation.
Yeah, I like that analogy. It's not just about seeing that big picture anymore. It's about having the tools to explore the fine details and really understand those tiny intricacies of how diseases actually develop.
Okay, so we've got psoriasis linked to the liver and type 1 diabetes connected to the small intestine.
Right.
This is all so fascinating, but I have to admit, it's a lot to wrap my head around.
It is a lot, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. This research is opening up so many new avenues to explore, but one of the most groundbreaking aspects of Phenformer isn't just its ability to uncover these hidden connections, it's that it can actually identify subtypes within a disease.
Wait, so you mean like different flavors of the same disease?
Exactly. It's like realizing that what we thought was one single disease is actually a bunch of slightly different conditions, each with their own unique characteristics and maybe even requiring different treatment approaches.
Okay, so even if two people are diagnosed with, let's say, psoriasis, their underlying causes and the best way to treat them could be totally different.
Precisely. And Phenformer can help us separate those differences. Remember those personalized risk profiles we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, Phenformer can use those profiles to group people based on similarities in their predicted disease mechanisms.
So it's like sorting people into different buckets based on the specific genes that are contributing to their risk.
Yep, you got it. And this is where things get really interesting from a treatment standpoint. Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, we can start to tailor treatments to that specific subtype of the disease that a person has.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that not all patients with the same diagnosis are the same.
This is starting to sound like the future of medicine we've always dreamed of. Treatments that are truly personalized to each individual.
It's definitely a future worth striving for, and Phenformer is giving us a little peek into what that could look like.
All right, so can you give me some concrete examples? How did Phenformer actually identify these disease subtypes in the research?
Well, they looked at those 6 major diseases again, and what they found was that Phenformer was able to identify distinct subtypes within 2 of them, psoriasis and diabetic retinopathy.
Okay, let's start with psoriasis. What kind of subtypes did Phenformer find?
Well, one subtype of psoriasis that it found was associated with a much higher risk of also developing dermatitis and seborrheic dermatitis.
So it's like a more complex form of psoriasis with additional complications.
Exactly. And that knowledge is so important when you're making treatment decisions.
Yeah.
Like if we know a patient belongs to this subtype, we might need to be more aggressive with their treatment or maybe even consider additional therapies to address those other skin conditions.
It's like we can get ahead of the game and prevent those complications from developing.
Exactly. And it's recognizing that one treatment plan doesn't work for everyone with psoriasis. There are all these nuances and subtleties that we need to take into account.
Okay, so what about diabetic retinopathy? What kind of subtypes did they find there?
This one's pretty interesting. Phenformer identified a subtype of diabetic retinopathy that was also linked to a higher risk of developing dermatitis.
Wait, diabetic retinopathy is an eye condition, right? And dermatitis is a skin condition. That seems like a weird connection.
Yeah, it does. But remember, Phenformer is looking at things on a molecular level,
Right.
and it's totally possible that there are shared genetic factors or pathways that contribute to both of those conditions.
So it's like Phenformer is telling us, hey, even though these conditions seem unrelated on the surface, there might be a deeper connection going on at the cellular level.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of this technology. It's helping us see these connections that we would have never even thought to look for before. It's expanding our understanding of how diseases actually develop and how seemingly unrelated conditions might be linked.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. Disease subtypes, hidden connections. This is like next level stuff. So
Yeah.
where do we go from here? What's the next chapter in this story?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it takes us to a much bigger conversation about the future of medicine as a whole. We've seen how Phenformer is already making a big impact, but this is really just the beginning.
So imagine a world where this kind of technology is available everywhere. What would healthcare look like?
That's what we'll talk about in the last part of our deep dive. We'll discuss the potential of personalized medicine, the challenges we have to overcome, and what it all means for you and your health.
Okay, so let's jump into that future. We've seen how Phenformer is already changing things, but imagine a world where this technology is like everywhere. What would that mean for healthcare?
Oh, it would be huge. We could be talking about a complete shift in how we approach, well, health and disease in general. Instead of waiting for people to get sick, we could be proactive, identifying risks early, and taking steps to prevent disease.
So it's like getting a personalized health forecast, right?
Yeah, exactly. Imagine getting a detailed report based on your genome. It could tell you your risks for different diseases and even give you advice on lifestyle changes or preventative therapies. It's about putting you in control of your health.
Sounds amazing, but also a little scary. What if you find out you're at high risk for something serious? That would be tough to deal with.
That's a good point, and it highlights the importance of genetic counseling. It's not just about getting the data, it's about understanding what it means for you and what you can do about it.
So it's like having someone help you navigate that personalized health forecast.
Exactly. It's about empowering you to make informed decisions. And speaking of personalized, this brings us to another exciting aspect, personalized treatments.
Okay, yeah, we talked about disease subtyping before, but I'm curious how that might actually work in the real world.
Well, think about it. Right now, doctors often have to use a trial and error approach with medications. They prescribe something and see how you respond, and if it doesn't work, they adjust the dosage or try a different medication.
Yeah.
But what if we could use your genetic information to know in advance which drugs are most likely to work for you and which ones might cause problems?
Wow, so no more guessing games with medication.
Exactly. It would make treatments way more effective and safer. And it's not just limited to medication. This personalized approach could be used for all sorts of things like lifestyle changes, different therapies, even preventative measures.
It sounds like a whole new era of healthcare where everything is tailored to your specific needs.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that everyone is different and healthcare should reflect that.
This all sounds incredible, but are there any downsides? What challenges do we need to think about as we move towards this kind of future?
Oh, you're right. It's not all perfect. One of the biggest issues is making sure everyone has access to these advancements. Genetic testing and personalized therapies can be expensive, and we need to make sure that everyone can benefit, not just the wealthy.
That's a really important point. Personalized medicine shouldn't create a bigger gap between the rich and the poor.
Absolutely. And then there are the ethical issues, like we talked about before. Data privacy is a huge concern. We need to have strong protections in place to make sure your genetic information isn't misused.
It's like we need to find the right balance, right? We want to unlock the potential of personalized medicine while also protecting people's rights.
Yeah, exactly. It's a delicate balance, and it requires a lot of open discussion and careful planning.
So what do we do now? How do we ensure that this future of personalized medicine benefits everyone?
It's going to take a team effort. We need scientists doing research, policymakers making rules, doctors using these new tools, and people like us talking about these issues and making informed decisions about our health.
So we all have a role to play.
We do. And the decisions we make now will shape the future of healthcare for a long time.
This deep dive into Phenformer and personalized medicine has been amazing. It feels like we're on the verge of a revolution in healthcare, a revolution that has the potential to really change our lives for the better.
Yeah.
But it's a revolution that requires careful thought and a commitment to making sure everyone benefits.
Well said. The future of healthcare is personal, and we all need to work together to make sure it's a good one.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.